Greetings, world mythology lovers! This is Mr. P of Mr. P's Mythopedia here with another fantastical tale of legendary supernatural goodness, straight from the deep annals of time and from cultures long since fallen, but not forgotten. What have I got for you today in this episode? Well, we're going to take a peek into one of the most mysterious, hard-edged, and blood-bathed civilizations to ever pop up in the Americas. The human-sacrificing, obsidian weapon-wielding Aztec Empire of Central America. Few civilizations ever reached the level of bloodshed and organized mayhem that the Aztecs did, and today we're going to take a look at the origin of that culture, beginning with a semi-legendary homeland, a long-distance trek through deadly deserts, and of course the god that made it all possible, one of my personal favorites out of thousands of gods, the vicious yet protective war god of the Aztecs, Huitzilopochtli. This guy was and still is one of the most intense deities to ever interact with humanity, offering up a powerful destiny and protection to the early Aztec people in exchange for untold gallons of blood, all to continue the universe from collapsing. This guy, well, you'll just have to listen to his story to understand just how gruesomely epic and over-the-top he really is. That doesn't mean he didn't take care of his chosen people. Even though he demanded blood, the Aztecs truly believed that if they didn't feed Huitz, for short, the universe, the sun, stars, and everything else would cease to work. No food for the big guy equals no universe. That went for the rest of their gods and goddesses too, to an extent, but as the war god, Huitz took a little more in than the average deity. That's not to say the Aztecs didn't have a vibrant, inventive, and interesting culture. They were quite advanced in many areas, and their cities made some of those in Europe at the time look like something built by a 5-year-old in a sandbox. They just had that whole blood thing going to ensure the very survival in their minds. Alright, let's strap in and check out the tale of Huitzilopochtli and see how our bloody Aztec war god brought a bunch of scraggly nomads to the peak of imperial greatness. While you listen, the link to the actual print story, written by yours truly at the Mythopedia, can be reached at the link in the description below. It'll take you to the actual Mythopedia page for Huitz if you'd like to read in and listen at the same time. We'll see you on the other side. Ancient Mexico was a place rip-roaring with ultra-violence, rough times, and a serious land where people really and truly needed a serious attitude to survive. And back then, only the strongest survived. Long before the Spanish ever showed up to forcibly convert the original natives of Mexico, red blood flowed. Death was an everyday part of life, and life overall was probably fairly short and brutal if you were in a specific class of people. That was especially true during the time period where the Aztec Empire ruled supreme over the land, and where priests hunted high and low for sacrifices to keep their military might going strong. It wasn't that the Mexica, the main tribe that made up the Aztecs, who were really an empire made up of 3 groups called the Triple Alliance, were out to just murder and slaughter innocent people just for the heck of it. Yes, they were fierce and struck horror into the hearts of their enemies, but the real reason for all the bloodshed was to feed their many gods. You see, without blood, the Mexica reckoned, the sun just wouldn't come up tomorrow, and the world would end. The crops would die, and life would be snuffed out. So they saw it as a religious duty to keep ripping people's hearts out atop their massive pyramids and keep their gods fat and happy. Especially one of the king daddy gods, a particularly, if not the worst of the worst, vicious and blood-crazed god called Huitzilopochtli, the god who kept the empire together and who, according to the mythology of the Aztecs, helped the original Mexica out of their original homeland and on the road to paradise and power. Little note here, just to keep things on the short side, we're going to stick to Huitz as his name, just to make it a little easier. Like most Aztec gods, Huitz had all kinds of jobs and multitasked pretty well to tend to his human worshippers. He was the god of war, no shocker there, the god of the sun, one of many in the Aztec pantheon, the god of sacrifice all around, duh, and the patron god of the city of Tenochtitlan, the capital city of the Aztec Empire, which he helped to found back in the good old days. More to that to come. Better than that, old Huitz was the national god of the Aztec Empire, kind of like the sponsor and symbol of his people. And with a symbol like that, how could any empire lose? Any awesome wins in battle and any horrid losses in defeat were attributed to Huitz. If the blood was flowing, the battle would be won. But if the sacrifices were a little lean that year, the battles would be an epic fail. And a defeat for Huitz was a defeat for the people. That's how the Aztecs saw it. Glory and the continuation of their culture depended on pampering Huitz with all the delicious blood that he could drink. Want details? No problem. As mentioned, Huitz's victims usually came from war captives that the Aztecs captured in their almost endless battles. They were dragged, kicking and screaming, to the top of the Temple Mayor, the ginormous pyramid temple in the middle of their capital city of Tenochtitlan, where priests would strap them down to a gore-soaked altar and, still alive, have their hearts removed with a razor-sharp obsidian knife. The heart and the gallons of blood that erupted from the poor prisoners gushed out in rivers and flowed down the steps of the pyramid. Think that's bad? Oh, it gets worse. The now very dead victims were then skinned. The corpses would be decapitated and dismembered. Yep, cut up into little pieces. And the torso of the victim was tossed down the steps of the pyramid to land at the very bottom. At the bottom of the pyramid, well, that's where one would find stone-carved snakes and a massive round stone showing the dismembered head of Huitz's sister, Coyolxauhqui. More on her later. Worse yet, during this gory, grisly horror, holy priests and nobles actually ate parts of the sacrificed flesh. The most prized part to bite into? The heart. Yikes. On the softer side of Huitz, people also gave him tons, literally, of flowers, as well as quail eggs. Maybe a secret pleasure of Huitz. His many statues were hung with garlands of beautiful tropical flowers, and the women danced a traditional serpent dance, all in honor of the head honcho Huitz. As far as his name is concerned, modern-day archaeologists have different takes on what it means. The most common suggestions is that it means left-handed hummingbird in Nahuatl, the Aztec language. Not really a good war god name. In a special hymn that was sung to honor Huitz, called the Tlaxotecoyotl, he was referred to as the dart hurler, the divine hurler, and in general a terror to all the enemies of the Mexica. He was also called Ziopili, turquoise prince, and Totec, our lord. Like most gods throughout history, Huitz had a ton of weird, and in some cases truly awful tales told about him. Where he came from, how he worked with and against the people of Mexico, things like that. According to one version of Aztec mythology, Huitz was the son of the creator god and goddess, and the bro of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, who plays a big role in Aztec legend. And Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, an all-around rough guy. Huitz's parents gathered both himself and Quetzalcoatl. They didn't bother with Tezcatlipoca because he was that untrustworthy, and gave them the holy task of bringing about and keeping order in the universe. No problem. Along the way, the two brothers managed to rack up quite a list of achievements, including fire, the first human man and woman, so technically Huitz was a creator god too, the earth itself, and the crowning achievement, the sun, which Huitz took the credit for. In another version of Aztec mythology, a more vicious and bloody version, therefore maybe a more exciting version, Huitz came about in a much different way. The rather fierce goddess of the moon and stars, Coatlicue. She was called the Snake Woman for good reason, a real piece of work she was hanging out one day, minding her own vicious business and sweeping the top of her sacred hill called Coatepec, or Serpent Hill, when a gigantic tumbleweed-like ball of bird feathers came flying by. In some bizarre way that is never ever explained in the myths, this ball of feathers manages to impregnate Coatlicue. But hey, it's mythology. It's not always supposed to make sense. Coatlicue's other two kiddos, Sansanhuitznoa, male, and Coyolxauhqui, female, both of who were both fully grown adult gods, were pretty ticked off that their mom had become with child in such a non-respectful way, and decided to take their anger out on her. You'd hope for maybe a little more sympathy from her own children, but they weren't having it. They were seriously offended and decided to off their own mom. But just as they were about to shank her to death with a pair of wickedly sharp obsidian daggers, they got one doozy of a shocking surprise, when out of Coatlicue's belly, the fully grown, terrible, and ready-to-kill Huitz ripped his way out of his mom's womb with his own obsidian dagger. Yes, that's right, he gouged his own way out of his mom's body with an ultra-sharp knife. With fire in his newborn eyes, he attacked his older brother and sister with a ferocity that no other god could match, brutally stabbing Sansanhuitzcoa and lopping the head right off of Coyolxauhqui, then dumping her body down the side of the mountain. Only a few seconds into his life, Huitz was already proving that he meant business, and that business was going to be good. For him anyways. In any case, that's how the Aztecs decided to show the sun, Huitz, the stars, Sansanhuitnoa, and the moon, Coyolxauhqui, and it explained why the sun was always chasing the stars and moon across the sky every day, relentlessly. It also explained why Huitz needed so much blood. If he wasn't able to keep up his strength, his bro and sis would finally be able to kill off their mother, the stars in the sky, and the universe would fall apart, ending everything. Huitz had the look of a total butt kicker and life destroyer, as you'd expect a blood-guzzling, high-energy war god would have. He was shown with a dark, menacing, and scowling, craggy face, which sometimes had blue and gold stripes painted upon it, just for added effect, was fully armed to the teeth and equipped with the best and nastiest obsidian weapons available. To add an even more outstanding detail to his already dangerous appearance, he carried around a snake-shaped scepter and an obsidian mirror. In most depictions of him, he carries a shield, holds feathered darts to be used with an atlatl, a special dart-flinging weapon, and was shown painted up with blue arms and legs. Maybe for school spirit, probably not. To top it off, he was usually shown strutting around in a headdress of blue and green hummingbird feathers, which completed the look of total face wrecker. Huitz was often symbolized as a hummingbird, and the Aztecs fully believed that when men and women died in battle, they would become hummingbirds and reside with Huitz in the afterlife. The Aztecs made Huitz a huge part of their own origin story when it came to explaining the awesome might of their empire. According to Aztec history, their civilization simply started off as a bunch of nomadic warriors who lived far, far to the north of Mexico, in a land called Aztlan. Aztlan was a dry, barren, desert-like place, and because it was basically the worst place ever, the Aztecs knew that if they didn't get out of there, their people weren't going to last very long. They needed a new place to call home, and quick. But where to go? The desert stretched out in all directions. Green was not a color one saw much of. Water? Yeah, right. What was a ragtag bunch of nomadic warriors to do? Well, that's where Huitz came in. He arrived in Aztlan in all of his savage awesomeness, ordered the Aztecs to leave their desert home, and told them to look for signs on where to go. He'd be guiding them to a new home where they would become powerful over all others. Naturally, the leaders of the Azteca Chicomostoca, loved the sound of that, so they rounded up every last member of their tribe around and marched them south out of Aztlan, as per Huitz's instructions. In modern day, archaeologists are still trying to figure out if Aztlan was a real location, and if so, where it might have been. The current idea is that it was in Utah's desert somewhere. Through the desert the Aztec plodded, and each time they began to worry, Huitz would give them some kind of sign, sometimes dropping by himself to get them pumped up again. Along the way, Huitz even lent the Aztecs his own sister, Mythilopochtli, to guide them on their journey, and eventually she forced the Aztecs to settle down and build a city dedicated to her, called Malinalco. As you can imagine, that did not last very long because the Aztecs got tired of her heavy-handed leadership style and begged Huitz to take her back. Not liking the sound of the way his drama queen sister had treated his chosen people, Huitz put her to sleep and told the Aztecs to make a run for it. When Mythilopochtli woke up from her deep sleep, the whole gang was gone and she was beyond ticked off. Sweet revenge against Huitz was on her mind, and so she had a son named Copil. While the Aztecs were wandering the deserts for years, Copil grew up, and Mythilopochtli eventually sent him out to kill Huitz. That did not go over well. It took 2 hits. One hit to Copil's face, and his body hitting the ground. You don't mess with the best because you really will die like the rest. Huitz tore out Copil's heart and chucked it far across the land, where it came to a splashdown in a huge blue mountain lake called Texcoco. That wasn't the last you'd hear of Copil's heart in the story, though as years later, Huitz told the still traveling and extremely road-tired Aztecs to seek out the heart and build their city over it. How would they know where it would come to be? Well, X marks the spot would be right where they would find a giant cactus, and upon the cactus, munching on a sacred serpent snake, would be a proud and mighty eagle, which was Huitz's personal animal. Look for that, Huitz told them, and you've got the place. The dirty, exhausted nomads lumbered on, crossing their fingers, hoping that Huitz wasn't messing with them and keeping an eyeball out for the cactus, snake, and eagle. After several more years, they were about to give up the game, but finally, one dry, hellishly hot Central American day, they came over the top of a hill and gazed down on the heavenly-looking Valley of Mexico, with Lake Texcoco gleaming like a blue gemstone in the middle of it. In an island in the middle of the lake, they finally found the sign they'd been promised. A giant thorny cactus, a huge threatening eagle, and a huge, coiling yet dying snake in its razor-sharp beak. This was the place. Almost immediately, the Aztecs began constructing their new home, the city that would someday become the vast, powerful, and glorious city of Tenochtitlan. And the rest is history. Protected and egged on by their god of war and city patron, the Aztecs would go on to conquer with an iron fist a huge chunk of land smack dab in the middle of what we today call Mexico. And they did it by feeding the blood of those they conquered into the belly of their rescuer god, the mighty, bloodthirsty Huitzilopochtli. Even today, the modern people of Mexico carry a bit of Huitz with them. An eagle sitting on a prickly pear cactus, holding a snake in one of its talons, can be seen today on the national flag of Mexico. And there you go, folks. Quite the blood-drenched little mythological tale there, in all of its glory. In some cases, you might even say that the Aztecs' constant expanding quest for blood actually wound up destroying them, rather than making them more powerful. The folks the Aztec conquered really weren't too cool with the huge numbers of their population being marched to the top of the sacrificial pyramids to be slaughtered. When the Spanish showed up, they allied with those same folks who really wanted to see the Aztecs pay for all the death and destruction. And when that went down, not even the fury of Huitzilopochtli could save them, between the uprisings, smallpox, and superior firepower. So long, Aztecs. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the story, and hope you stay tuned to this channel for more upcoming mythological supernatural awesomeness. And if you're an educator using this video, again, feel free to subscribe as well as use the written version of this story in your classes from the links in the description below. Thanks for the support, and thanks for watching.